A friend said to me a while ago, here as part of this community, he said he'd voluntarily entered into a nightmare situation at work. Everything was going wrong, and everyone was saying, we've got to shut this work down, and that had meant a good work stopping, people losing their jobs, but he felt prompted by the Spirit to say, no, we've got to keep on going, and led the charge. And for months, it's been a mess, and in the last few weeks, it has all come together. It is totally miraculous. And one of his colleagues, slightly surprised, said, when you took this on, could you see the light at the end of the tunnel? To which he replied, light? I couldn't even find the flipping tunnel. That is the kind of situation that many of us find ourselves in. And that's what it looks like to follow Jesus a lot of the time, courageously stepping into chaos. But the question is, what next? Because rarely, when we step into the chaos, does it immediately resolve instantly. What happens in that moment between the chaos and courage? And our reading today speaks into this powerfully. It's the reading that the song, our last song that we sang, was based on. It's a reading that many scholars say that you can read the whole story of the Bible through the lens of this story. It's the story of the Exodus, where in Exodus 14, the people of God, led by Moses, have been allowed by Pharaoh to leave and are heading out when they come to an obstacle. And so we pick up the story in verse 8 of chapter 14 of the book of Exodus. And it says this: the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all of Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen and troops, all the king's horses and all the king's men, they pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi-Haroth, near Baal-Zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us out into the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It had been better to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you'll see the deliverance that the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be silent. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the waters so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they go after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen. And then jumping to the end, we read that Moses then stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind, and it turned into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and to their left. And the story finishes with Moses raising his hand again once the Israelites are through, and the waters coming down on their enemies, and they are delivered. But the key scene for us, the one that is speaking into our question tonight, is this. You have Moses standing ankle deep, going for a paddle in the Red Sea with an impassable ocean in front of him, an army intent on slaughter behind him, and the people he's leading surrounding him and turning on him. This is the moment of fight or flight. This is the moment where I ask, am I going to be a bystander or a game changer? This is us when we stand between chaos and courage and choose to lean in. But at that moment, as we step into the chaos, often one of our first reactions is, oh gosh, I didn't realize it was this bad. Oh gosh, I hadn't quite realized the severity of what I was stepping into. A friend of mine who works in a bank and had taken on a new position said to me, there's a new skeleton in every cupboard every week. I won't tell you which bank he works for. And the reaction when that happens can often be, I must be in the wrong place. I need to get out. But the first thing that this story shows us is this is normal. This is nothing out of the ordinary. When you find yourself in a troubling time, do not be surprised. I wonder, have you ever been in one of those situations where it's all going really well? You're nailing it, and then suddenly in a moment, it all collapses around you. We had a moment like that when we first moved to KL. Some of the team, we were living together in a temporary apartment, and we had friends coming over. We were going to hang out, have lunch with them and their kids, then play some basketball. But the place had got quite messy, so we decided we need to clear up. So we spent all morning clearing up, tidying away our mess, cleaning the surfaces, putting everything away, and we had literally just finished when my friend Luke thought that this was a great moment to throw the said basketball at me. Now, you can kind of see where this is going. First of all, I was over there, and he threw it this way. He is like a terrible, terrible shot. But also, being from England, it's cold. Very, very cold all year round in England. We weren't used to air conditioning units, and we also, Keely, weren't used to ceiling fans. Luke threw this ball straight into the ceiling fan. He still to this day claims that it was sucked up into the fan, but that did not happen. Fans blow Luke, okay? He's not listening. Anyway, he threw it into the fan. I've never seen a basketball move so fast. It shot across the room straight into this big glass light fitting, which exploded, fell down onto the table, and then shattered and threw itself all over the apartment. At that point, the doorbell rang. The family arrived with their kids running to come in. We had to hold them back at the door while we searched for every single shard of glass, which was on every chair, every surface, everywhere. Things can go from being brilliant to disaster in a moment. And that's what happens for the Israelites. In verse 8, we read the Israelites who were marching out boldly. They're leaving. It's the greatest victory ever known. And then in verse 10, 2 verses later, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them, and they were terrified and cried out to the Lord. 2 verses to go from boldness to absolute terror. It's all going so well, and then it all comes crashing down. And in that moment, the human heart doesn't always respond brilliantly. This isn't always our finest moments. The way the crowd here respond is with sarcasm. Perhaps secretly they were British, I don't know. This is what they say. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us out to the desert to die?" It's like, this is the most sarcastic line in the Bible. It's so faithless. They've just seen sign and wonder after sign and miraculous wonder, and yet the moment it turns against them, they turn on their leader. This is normal. If you find yourself in this position, you are in good company. Rather than thinking you must be in the wrong place, actually, in some ways, you can be more assured that you are in the place where God is calling you than when things are going really well. Paul, in his letter to the Corinthian church, says this: "A door for effective ministry has opened to me, and many oppose me." For Paul, you know you are in the right place when you have fruitfulness and you have opposition. And where they collide, that is often where God is calling you to. Because no good thing, no great thing ever came without opposition. The bad news, if you like, is that no blessing ever goes uncontested. No blessing goes uncontested, but the promise is that no battle ever goes unblessed. And Moses has the fruit. He's got the people of Egypt. They're on their way out. He had to appear before Pharaoh and sing "Let It Go" more times than a 4-year-old that's seen Frozen before eventually Pharaoh lets them leave. But eventually they've gone. He's let them go. And now they're out. Here comes the opposition. The sea in front of them. The army behind him. The crowd turning on all around him. But this is where the Lord wants him. This is the place of greatness. This is the place of calling. This kind of chaos is normal, and we should expect to encounter it. One of the really helpful things about reading the Old Testament is it gives you a really realistic picture of what people are like, what humanity are like. Like, this isn't the last time the people of God ever complain. As the story continues, they get through the Red Sea, they go out into the desert, and here they have to make do without some of the creature comforts that they've got used to back in Egypt. And they start to complain about the food. I think we can all understand. They start complaining about the food, and the book of Numbers records what they say. They say this: "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. And also the cucumbers." Like, never forget that the human heart will seriously contemplate trading in all the promises of God for a half-decent zucchini. And it's a total illusion. They say, "We ate fish at no cost." Well, yes, in Egypt, you ate with no cost because you had no money, because you were slaves, without inheritance, without protection, without rights. And, oh yeah, they slaughtered all your children. Oh yeah, but the condiments, they were out of this world. If you're going through a tricky time with tricky people, that's normal. This is what people are like. But most importantly, this is what I am like, because I am people. I am tricky. And the moment discomfort comes, I'm the first to want to run back to where I feel safe. See, the chaos is not just out there, the chaos is also in here. And as we realize that, often the temptation can be to start to think, well, God wouldn't want to be involved in my life. Or God wouldn't want to use me because of who I am or maybe what I've done. But this couldn't be further from the truth. The people of Israel were tricky and God picked them. Moses, he wasn't straightforward either, and the Lord picked him. The Lord loves to use people like them and like me. Jesus isn't surprised by the chaos within us. You know, Take, for example, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. This is Jesus' manifesto for what an apprenticeship to Jesus will look like as it plays itself out in your life. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus assumes that some stage you will be tempted to divorce your spouse, tempted to argue and fall out with other Christians, tempted to want more money than you need, to be racked with anxiety, to be racked with guilt, and to be tempted to ignore every single word that he has said. This is no utopia that Jesus steps into to lead. I mean, look at the person that he chooses to take on the mantle and lead after he has left. Peter, who, when he takes on the role, doesn't think that the gospel is for non-Jewish people. Like, the head of the worldwide universal church did not believe the good news was for everyone when he took the job. That is a HR hiring fail in any person's book except Jesus. This is no utopia that he steps in to lead. And it's no utopia that he invites us to step into and step up to lead in. He uses people like you and people like me. He uses us in the chaos that we encounter, even when that chaos is coming from within us. And if that's where you find yourself today, you are in good company, because that is where God leads. And in that, he has one aim. And he tells it 3 times in this chapter alone. He says, in all of this, I will gain glory for myself. 3 times he says that to you. When you find yourself in chaos, God is at work to bring glory to himself through it. And he does it in 2 ways. First of all, he does it by saving us. And second of all, he does it by using us. These are the 2 dynamics that we need to be aware of as we follow him. Firstly, we are told, shh, be silent. Because as we step from chaos into courage, we need to know that this is impossible without him. Moses says, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be silent. Many of the situations that we face are impossible to deal with. In grief, in suffering, in moments where power is taken from our control. And for the people of Israel, there was nothing they could do. They're surrounded by death and it's coming closer. And the Lord says through Moses, I will fight for you. You be silent. See, the temptation when things go wrong is to complain, to grumble. Now, Moses doesn't here say, no, you need to stop doing that and instead speak it up, like deny reality, put an upspin on it. He doesn't say think positive thoughts. He just says, I know it's bad. It's really, really bad, but let's be quiet because even though I can do nothing, the Lord wants to do something. But I don't know about you, silence is hard. We find silence hard. Silence is so strange. Recently, a clip of the 10 o'clock BBC News went viral after a technical glitch left the news presenter sitting in silence. And we're going to see a clip of it now. And it goes on for another 4 more minutes. It was so strange, so rare to have silence in our world. The clip went viral. Many people said this was the most comforting news broadcast they had watched in a long, long time. Our world is full of words. WhatsApp now has 1 billion users who send 55 billion messages each day, half of which seem to be to groups that I'm in. The world is filled with words, but in a chaotic moment, we're told to start in silence. What does that mean as we lead? Well, I think what it's a picture of, firstly, is holding back in judgment. When things go really wrong, do you know what? It's a lot more fun to play detective than judge. It's a lot more fun to play the detective and try and work out what went wrong so we can do it better next time than to play judge and assign blame and motive. Do you know what? Most of the time, I don't know the motives of my own heart, let alone be able to judge anyone else's. It's also listening. You will shine as a leader if you offer no words but listen to others. Most people in pain need to be heard, not spoken to. It also means letting go. A lot of what we desire is out of our control, and silence is a picture of letting go of the neat plans that we have for our lives. A mentor said to me a while ago, we can't make it happen, so what will we do if it doesn't? And we can be confident in the silence because we know that he is at work. This story makes it clear that no matter how big the chaos, we read that God is present in our problems. In this story, we see him directing them, speaking to them, traveling with them, watching them, driving the sea for them, buying time for them, and ultimately saving them. God is present in our problems, even when, especially when, our problems are ourselves. See, as big as any battle we face outside of us, the biggest battle we face is not the chaos outside, but the chaos within. What the Bible tells us and experience affirms day and day again is that we are beautifully and wonderfully made. We are good. We are God-breathed. There is something amazing and brilliant in each and every one of us. But this isn't the whole story. There is also this mysterious mix in our hearts of brilliance and brokenness, of incredible strength and incredible fallibility. We are wonderful, yet we are weak. In us, as well as the good, there is what the Bible calls sin. Now, sin puts us out of sync with everything. It puts us out of sync with God. Our relationship with Him is broken. It puts us out of sync with the universe, with each other, even with ourselves. One person described the effect of sin like this, that if there were two of you, you wouldn't get along. That's the fullness of the effect that sin has on us. Now, there is nothing we can do to resolve it, to heal it, to make up for it. Any good we do is just, that's what we were supposed to be doing in the first place. Any good within us is gifted to us, comes from Him anyway. Like Moses, if we're honest, we stand with the waters of our sin in front of us, with the army of consequences racing up behind us, and with our accuser surrounding us. And in that moment, we're told, the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be silent. Staying silent means letting the best loved picture of yourself die, of saying, Jesus, I've nothing to offer. I have no excuses, no justification. We say, Lord, instead, like you deserved everything, and I withheld it from you. All that's good in me has come from you. I have nothing to offer you except my silence. And that is the place where we receive grace. Because as we confront our selfish selves, we are confronted by His selfless love. Because you discover, as you're honest about who you are before Him, that you are already known, already accepted, and already loved. Jesus says, stand by the impassable waters of your sin and be silent. Offer no justification, no works, no excuse, and know that as He did with the Red Sea, the Lord will part them for you. He will drive your sin away, and what looked like a watery grave becomes a dry path to walk into all of the promises that He has for your life. But again, we have to step into those promises. St. Augustine put it like this: without God, I can't, but without me, God won't. Without God, I can't. Be silent. He's fighting for you. But without me, God won't. He wants us to step out in faith. God's aim in the chaos is to bring glory to Himself. He does that by saving us, but He also does it by using us, and in the process, growing faith in us. Love loves to involve the beloved. And so the Lord says to Moses, raise your staff, stretch out your hand and over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through on the sea on dry ground. Now, God did not need Moses. Moses could not do it. If I'd have been him, I'd have been like, Lord, how about you part the sea and then I raise my hand, because I don't want to look foolish. Why does He involve him? Well, the answer is that He's growing us. See, the Lord does not want puppets. He does not want drone. He wants children. He wants to use us. He wants children who freely choose what He would choose, to freely choose to follow Him, to freely choose to love Him. And if He does everything for us, that won't get us to the end destination of what He has for us. Now, sometimes we shy away from that because we think that effort is opposed to grace. But effort isn't opposed to grace. Grace doesn't mean no effort. It simply means that it's not earned. He pushes us out. He does the impossible, and he involves us in the possible so that we grow. This is us when in faith we stretch out a hand and offer to pray for someone. Can I heal them? No. But I can lay a hand and command healing in Jesus' name as he told us to do. That's faith. This is faith when we open our Bibles each day and read some words. We do the possible and he does the impossible and he makes himself known to us. This is us when we choose to step out in courage into the chaos, in work, in friendships, in relationships, saying, Lord, I can't do it, but you can, and I want to be available to you. Continuing to pray for that person, for that healing, for that breakthrough. And sometimes it looks silly. You know, Moses, we read, stretched out his hand, and what we read is, all night long, the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind. All night long, as Lionel Richie sang, all night long, the wind blew to drive back the sea. It didn't happen instantly. Rarely ever do miracles happen just like that. But we read by the morning, the waters were divided and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and the left. And they passed through the impossible because God has made a way. Faith is key because that's when we are most like Christ. That's when we are most like what he is calling us to become, because that's what Jesus did. As we said before, you can read the whole of the story of the Bible through the lens of this story. And this is just a foretaste of what Jesus did on the cross. It's a picture that we reenact as we come and share communion later. See, Jesus courageously stepped out into the chaos. He left heaven and became human and took on a team of misfits. And in the Exodus story, there's this beautiful imagery that the sun goes down and Israel, the people of God, are taken out of Egypt. And we don't hear that the sun's come up until they have escaped from the king's rule, passed through the sea, and are now towards the promised land. And then we hear that the sun has come up. And in the Passion story, the story of Jesus' death, we get this same thing in reverse, that the sun goes down and the people of God do what they had constantly been longing to do, and they give their king over to be crucified, and they give themselves back into slavery and say, we have no king but Caesar. And then we read that the sun comes up. It's a reverse Exodus. But fortunately, the story doesn't stop there. Because in his trial, Jesus stood silent. The only person who could have said anything in his own defense. He could have said the right word at the right time and gone off scot-free. Yet, with death ahead of him and death behind him and his accusers surrounding him, he remained silent, knowing that his Father was fighting for him, just in that moment as he was fighting for us. And in faith, he allowed himself to be crucified. In faith, Moses stretched out one hand and delivered a nation. But in faith, Jesus stretched out both hands on the cross and delivered the entire world. And this was the greatest act of faith because he died. And in that place, he trusted the Father to raise him from the grave. And he did. And again, the story doesn't stop there, because now in possibly the greatest leap of faith, he now stretches out his arms once more towards us in invitation, inviting us to respond, to receive him, to come and follow him courageously into the chaos. And that's what we do now here in communion. We reenact this story. In faith, we get out of our seats and we come forward, not to earn, but simply to receive. Saying, I know that I'm not perfect, but I know that your love is Jesus. And I have nothing to offer, but I have everything to gain. And I know that you are transforming me to bring courage out of the chaos. Amen. Why don't we stand?